Okay, so you've probably seen this stuff popping up everywhere, right? In your smoothies, in supplements, all over health blogs. It's called Moringa, and people are hailing it as this huge new thing in wellness. But what's the real story behind this so-called miracle tree?
I mean, the claims are pretty impressive. We're talking lower blood sugar, better cholesterol, even a boost for new moms. On paper, it sounds like an absolute powerhouse of a plant. But, as we all know, claims are one thing. Evidence, that's a whole different ballgame.
So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's get right into it, cut through all the noise, and look straight at the science to answer that big question. Is Moringa the real deal, a genuine superfood, or is it all just super hype?
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll cover what Moringa actually is. Then, we'll dig into the evidence on blood sugar and cholesterol. After that, we'll talk dosage. How much is too much? We'll also look at its role for new mothers, and we're going to finish up with some really important safety stuff you absolutely need to hear.
All right, first up, the miracle tree. Let's take a look at what's behind all the buzz. So, Moringa oleifera. It's this incredibly tough tree. Seriously, it can thrive even in really dry, difficult conditions. And its leaves? They're basically nutritional gold. We're talking packed with vitamins, minerals, protein, and all the essential amino acids, the whole shebang. Plus, it's loaded with these anti-inflammatory plant chemicals, which explains why it's been a go-to in traditional medicine for like centuries.
Okay, let's get to the juicy part. Those big claims about blood sugar and cholesterol. So, what does the highest level of evidence actually say?
Now, before we dive into the results, let's quickly talk about what a meta-analysis is, because it's super important. Think of it like this. Instead of relying on one person's opinion, you survey a whole room of experts. A meta-analysis combines the results from a bunch of different scientific studies to get a way more powerful and precise answer. It's pretty much the gold standard for this kind of research.
So the specific meta-analysis we're looking at here from 2021, it took 7 different trials with 257 participants in total and crunched all that data together. This gives us a much clearer picture than just looking at any one of those small studies by itself.
And here's where things get really interesting, because the results were kind of split. On the plus side, the combined data showed a significant drop in fasting blood sugar and in that blood sugar spike you get after eating. That's pretty cool. But on the other side of the coin, it didn't seem to make a big difference in long-term blood sugar control, that's what HbA1c measures, or in things like LDL, the bad cholesterol, or triglycerides.
But hold on, there was one more little twist in the data. The analysis did find one other significant effect, an increase in HDL, which you probably know as the good cholesterol. So yeah, the evidence here is definitely a bit of a mixed bag, right? Some promising signs, but not a total home run.
Okay, so if there's some potential benefit, the next question is obvious, right? How much should you even take? And are there side effects? Like, is this something people can actually stick with long term?
Well, to figure that out, we're going to look at a recent study from researchers at UC Davis. They looked at this exact question. How well do healthy adults tolerate taking Moringa leaf powder every day?
And the way they did it was super straightforward. They just split people into 3 groups. One group got a low dose, another got a medium dose, and the third got a high dose, every day for a week. Simple as that.
So, the first big takeaway, really positive. Get this, a whopping 96% of the participants actually finished the whole 7-day study. That's a huge deal. It basically tells us that most people find it pretty easy to take Moringa every day, no matter which dose they were on. They just stuck with it.
But there's always a catch, right? Here it is. The study found that the higher the dose, the more people reported side effects. Specifically, the folks in that high-dose group, taking about 7.2 grams a day, reported way more GI symptoms than the people in the low-dose group.
Now let's be clear, these symptoms were generally pretty mild. We're talking things like a bit of bloating, nothing too serious. But the takeaway is pretty clear. Moringa seems really well tolerated, but once you start creeping up past that 7-gram-a-day mark, you might start running into more of those minor side effects. All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about another really popular use for Moringa, helping new mothers with their milk supply.
The fancy medical term for this is a galactagogue. It's basically any food, herb, or medicine that's thought to increase milk production. And Moringa has been used this way traditionally for a long time, especially over in Asia.
So, what's the science say? Well, you might be sensing a theme here. It's mixed. A few small studies do suggest it might help increase prolactin, that's the key milk-making hormone, and maybe boost milk volume. But, and this is a huge but, the US government's own database on this stuff, called LactMed, makes a really critical point. A lot of these studies are of, and I'm quoting here, extremely poor quality. That makes it really hard to draw any solid conclusions. And that brings us to some super important advice directly from that same database. They make it crystal clear. Galactagogues, things like Moringa, should never be the first thing you turn to. The #1 priority should always be getting professional help to figure out the real reasons behind any milk production issues.
Okay, this brings us to our final section, and honestly, it might be the most important one. Before you even think about trying Moringa, we need to talk about safety, side effects, and some really crucial drug interactions.
Now, this is definitely not a complete list, but it gives you an idea of how serious this can be. For example, if you take levothyroxine for your thyroid, Moringa might actually reduce how much of that medicine your body can absorb. Or if you're on metformin for blood sugar, adding Moringa could risk your blood sugar dropping too low. It can also mess with how your liver processes other common drugs, like certain statins for cholesterol or even sedatives like Valium.
So if you only remember one thing from this whole explainer, please let it be this. Always, and I mean always, talk to your doctor or a pharmacist before starting any new supplement, period. Especially if you're on any kind of prescription medication. They're the only ones who can give you the green light.
So where does all this leave us? What's the final verdict? Well, Moringa isn't just hype. There's some real promising science there, especially around blood sugar. But the research is still pretty young, and those potential drug interactions are no joke. So the question really isn't, is Moringa a miracle plant? The real question is, based on the evidence we have today, and most importantly, after a conversation with your doctor, is it right for you?